The Galactic Union Educational Station stretched across 3 kilometers of empty space, like a massive silver flower with dozens of petals reaching toward distant stars. Inside its biodome wing, young beings from 47 different species walked through corridors designed to accommodate everything from gas breathers to silicon-based life forms. Among them walked a small human girl named Yuna, her black hair tied back in a simple ponytail, her 8-year-old legs working twice as hard as her alien classmates to keep pace with their longer strides. Beside her padded a creature that drew stares and whispers from every direction. Bomi was a 4-month-old lion cub from the grasslands of Kenya on Earth, brought aboard the station as part of humanity's companion species demonstration program. His golden fur caught the artificial sunlight streaming through the biodome's transparent ceiling, and his amber eyes watched everything with the quiet attention that marked him as a predator even at this young age. The Earthchild brings her beast again, clicked Xari, a young Vethkai whose crystalline body refracted light into rainbow patterns across the floor. It is most unsettling to see a prey-sized being walk so calmly beside something with teeth. Yuna heard the comment but chose to ignore it. She had grown used to such remarks in her 3 months aboard the station. Her mother, Dr. Sumin Park, served as Earth's cultural liaison to the Galactic Union, and bringing Yuna along had been part of demonstrating that humans could integrate peacefully into galactic society. Bringing Bomi had been a more controversial decision. The lion cub had been orphaned when poachers killed his mother in the Masai Mara Reserve. Dr. Park had been working with the wildlife conservation team there before her appointment to the station, and young Bomi had imprinted on Yuna during those months of rehabilitation. Separating them would have caused distress to both child and cub, and so special permission had been granted. Today marked the 3rd week of the interspecies biology course, and Professor Kethvoran had announced that students would present examples of natural weapons from their homeworlds. Yuna took her seat in the circular amphitheater, Bomi settling at her feet with the lazy contentment of a well-fed predator around her. Beings of every shape and composition arranged themselves according to their environmental needs. The mock Tory students released calming pheromones that made the air smell faintly of vanilla. The Jexri floated in their personal water spheres. The Grothani hunched their massive armored bodies into reinforced seats designed to hold their weight. Professor Kethvoran glided to the center of the room, her serpentine body coiling gracefully as her 4 arms gestured for attention. Today we examined the diversity of natural defensive and offensive adaptations across member worlds, she announced, her translator rendering her hissing speech into clear galactic common. Each of you will share what evolution has granted your species for survival. The presentations began with the expected displays. A Grothani student demonstrated how his species could lock their armored plates together to form an impenetrable shell. A Jexri showed the venomous spines hidden beneath her seemingly soft exterior. A Mokturi explained how his people could release clouds of toxic pheromones when threatened. The Vethkai student, Vexari, proudly displayed how her crystalline body could generate blinding light bursts and even focus heat to her faceted surfaces. Each presentation drew appreciative sounds from the assembled students. Natural weapons were a point of pride among most species, proof of their evolutionary success. Then Professor Kethvoran turned her attention to Yuna, our human representative. The professor said, her tone carrying something Yuna could not quite identify. Perhaps you can explain what natural weapons your species possesses. The room fell silent. 46 pairs of eyes, optical sensors, and sensory organs turned toward the small human girl. Yuna felt the weight of their attention and understood what lay beneath it. She had studied enough galactic history to know that humanity was considered an oddity among spacefaring species. Humans had no venom, no armor, no claws worth mentioning, no ability to change color or release defensive chemicals by galactic standards. Humans appeared to be one of the most physically unremarkable species ever to achieve interstellar travel. Humans do not seem to have natural weapons, observed a Grothany student, his rumbling voice carrying genuine confusion rather than mockery. How did your species survive your homeworld's predators long enough to develop technology? Una stood, and Bomi rose with her, his small body pressing against her leg. Earth is what the Galactic Union classifies as a Category 7 death world, Una said, keeping her voice steady despite her nervousness. Our gravity is heavy compared to most inhabited planets. Our atmosphere contains a gas that is actually toxic to many species. And our world has extreme temperature variations. Yes, Professor Kethvoren interrupted. We are aware of Earth's classification, but that does not explain how humans specifically survived without obvious natural weapons. Una looked down at Bomi, and an idea formed in her mind. I could try to explain, she said slowly, but I think Bomi can show you better than I can tell you. The professor's forearm spread in a gesture of invitation. A demonstration would be most welcome. We should use the biodome, Una suggested. Bomi needs space to move properly, and the environment there is closer to Earth conditions. Permission was granted, and the class relocated to the biodome's African savanna simulation zone. Una had spent many hours here with Bomi, letting him exercise and explore in an environment that reminded his instincts of home. The golden grass swayed in artificial wind, and a warm sun simulation beat down from above. Bomi is only 4 months old, Una explained as she led the cub to an open area. He is still a baby by lion standards, but even now he has capabilities that would make him dangerous on many of your worlds. She knelt beside the cub and gently took one of his paws in her hand. Watch, she said with practiced ease. She pressed on the pad of Bomi's paw, and his claws extended. Gasps and startled sounds rippled through the watching students. The claws were curved, sharp and gleaming retractable claws, Una explained. Lions keep them hidden to keep them sharp, and they only bring them out when needed. She released Bomi's paw and picked up a thick branch that had fallen from one of the biodome's trees. Bomi, catch, she called, tossing it across the clearing. What happened next would stain the memories of every alien student present. The lazy, playful cub transformed in an instant. His body became a blur of golden motion. Muscles that had seemed soft now revealed his coiled power. He intercepted the branch in midair, his jaws clamping down with enough force to crack the wood audibly. Lions on Earth are apex predators, Una said into the stunned silence. They hunt animals much larger than themselves through cooperation and patience. And even this baby has the strength to seriously injure most beings in this room. Professor Kethvoran's translator crackled as she processed what she had witnessed. And humans, she said slowly, live alongside such creatures willingly. We have for thousands of years, Una confirmed, scratching Bomi behind his ears as he returned to her side, tail swishing proudly. We tamed wolves into dogs. We rode horses across continents, and we trained birds to hunt for us. She was about to continue when every light in the biodome suddenly flashed red. An alarm blared through the station's communication system. Containment breach in Sector 7, announced an automated voice. All personnel initiate lockdown protocols. The massive doors at both ends of the biodome slammed shut with a sound like thunder. Una looked around at the terrified faces of her alien classmates, then down at Bomi, whose ears had flattened against his skull. His playful demeanor had vanished entirely. Something was wrong. Something was coming, and they were trapped. The red emergency lights cast strange shadows across the biodome as Una tried to make sense of what was happening around her. The alien students had frozen in various states of panic. The Maktori were releasing so many stress pheromones that the air had become thick with the smell of burning sugar. The HFY student Dexari had dimmed her crystalline body until she was barely visible. Some instinctive camouflage response taking over. The Grothani had locked their armor plates and refused to move. Professor Kethvorin pressed herself against the sealed door, her forearms working frantically at the emergency panel. The manual override is not responding, she hissed, a normally calm voice tight with fear. We are completely isolated from the main station. What is happening? Asked a trembling Jexri student, her water sphere rippling with her distress. The station's communication system crackled to life again. Sketh containment failure, the automated voice announced. Parasitic organisms have escaped quarantine hold 7. All personnel are advised to seek reinforced shelter immediately. Yuna felt her blood run cold. She had studied the Galactic Union's database of dangerous species during her months on the station, and she remembered the entry on the Skethri very clearly. They were serpentine parasitic creatures from a dying world on the galaxy's outer rim. Adults could grow to 2 meters in length, but they preferred to find young hosts to feed on, draining biological energy slowly over weeks. They were fast, they were nearly silent, and they hunted in groups. To children, Professor Kethvorin said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Skethri always target the young first, as if her words had summoned them. A sound came from the ventilation grate high on the biodome's wall. It was a soft scraping noise, like scales dragging across metal. Every head turned toward the sound. Yuna counted the students around her, 7 young aliens of various species. 1 professor, and herself 8 children in total, if she counted herself, plus 1 adult who seemed to be losing control of her fear. The professor's serpentine body was coiling and uncoiling in what Yuna recognized as a prey response. The instinctive need to flee overriding rational thought. Professor Kethvorin, Yuna said firmly. We need to stay calm, but the professor was not listening. Her species had evolved as prey on their homeworld before developing technology, and 100,000 years of civilization could not erase millions of years of instinct. She was pressing herself into the corner, her eyes fixed on the ventilation grate. With pure terror, Bomi growled. The sound was low and rumbling, and it came from deep in the cub's chest. Yuna had never heard him make that noise before. His playful nature had vanished completely, replaced by something ancient and serious. His ears were flat against his skull. His lips were pulled back slightly to reveal his teeth, and every muscle in his small body was tensed for action. Bomi knows something is coming, Yuna said, more to herself than to anyone else. She looked around the biodome, assessing their situation the way her mother had taught her to assess any dangerous environment. The African Savannah Simulation Zone offered little in terms of shelter. There were some rocks, a few scattered trees, and the tall golden grass that swayed in the artificial breeze. The grass would provide concealment for the Skethri. Not for them, everyone, Yuna called out, her voice cutting through the panic. We need to move to the rocks. Now. The alien student stared at her, a young Makturi named. Pexolar managed to speak through his fear. Why should we listen to you? He asked. You are just a human child with no natural defenses at all. Because I grew up on a death world, Yuna replied, already moving toward the cluster of boulders at the center of the clearing. And I know how predators think. She did not wait to see if they followed. Bomi stayed close to her side, his eyes scanning the grass with an intensity that made him look twice his age behind her. She heard movement. The alien children were following. Even the terrified professor was slithering toward the rocks, her instinct to stay with the group overriding her instinct to hide alone. They reached the boulders just as the first Skethri emerged from the ventilation shaft. It was smaller than Yuna had expected from the database entry. Perhaps half a meter long, with iridescent scales that shifted between black and deep purple. Its head was triangular, dominated by 4 gleaming eyes that scanned the biodome with obvious intelligence. It was not alone. 3 more emerged behind it. Then 5 more after that. They spread out in a coordinated pattern that Yuna recognized immediately. It was a hunting formation, designed to surround prey and cut off escape routes. "They are young ones," Professor Kethvorn whispered, her scientific mind briefly overcoming her fear. "Juveniles from a breeding population, which means they are hungry and inexperienced." "Is that good or bad?" asked Dexari, her crystalline body flickering with nervous light. "Bad," the professor admitted. "Juvenile Skethri are more aggressive and less cautious than adults." Yuna positioned herself at the front of the group, with Bomi beside her. The other children clustered behind the rocks. Their various forms of hiding and defensive postures activated. "Stay close together," Yuna instructed. "Do not run no matter what happens, because running triggers a chase response in predators." "How do you know that?" asked the young Grothany, his voice muffled from inside his locked armor. "Because humans were both predator and prey on Earth," Yuna answered, her eyes tracking the Skethri as they slithered closer through the grass. "We learned how both sides think." The lead Skethri had spotted them. It raised its head above the grass, its 4 eyes fixing on the cluster of young beings huddled among the rocks. Yuna could almost see it calculating, determining which target was weakest, which would be easiest to separate from the group. Its gaze settled on Nexari, whose crystalline body was still flickering with distress signals that probably looked like weakness to a predator. The Skethri began to circle. Bomi's growl deepened. Yuna placed her hand on the cub's back, feeling the vibration of that warning sound traveling through his entire body. "Not yet," she whispered to him. "Wait for them to commit." She did not know if Bomi understood her words, but he seemed to understand her intent. He stayed beside her, muscles coiled like springs, eyes never leaving the circling predators. The other alien children watched in terrified silence. They had never seen anything like this on their worlds. When predators appeared, you hid or you fled, or your community's technology protected you. The idea of standing your ground, of waiting for the right moment to fight back, was utterly foreign to them. The lead Skethri made its decision. It lunged toward Dexari with a speed that blurred its form into a streak of dark scales, and Bomi moved. Yuna would later struggle to describe what happened in that moment. The lion cub, who had been playing with sticks just minutes ago, transformed into something primal and terrifying. He intercepted the Skethri in midair, his claws extended fully, his jaws open wide. The collision happened so fast that most of the watching students only registered the sound. It was a horrible noise of impact and tearing, and the high-pitched shriek of the Skethri as Bomi's claws found their mark. The creature was thrown back into the grass, wounded and thrashing, but more were coming. Yuna grabbed a fallen branch from the ground and planted her feet. She was 8 years old and alone on an alien station, with a baby lion and 7 terrified children who had never faced a predator in their lives. And somehow, impossibly, she felt ready. "Stay behind me," she called out to the others, her voice steady despite the fear racing through her heart. "Bomi and I will protect you." The remaining Skethri hesitated. They had expected easy prey. They had not expected resistance, but hunger drove them forward, and the pack began to close in from all sides. The Skethri came from 3 directions at once. Yuna had expected this pack. Predators on Earth used the same tactics, surrounding their prey and attacking from multiple angles to create confusion and fear. But Yuna had grown up watching wildlife documentaries with her mother, studying the hunting patterns of wolves and lions and painted dogs. She knew that pack hunters relied on their prey panicking and making mistakes. She refused to panic. "Bomi, left," she shouted. swinging her branch at the Skethri approaching from the right. The lion cub responded instantly, launching himself at the creature, slithering through the grass on the left side. Yuna's branch connected with the attacking Skethri with a satisfying crack, sending it tumbling away with a hiss of pain and surprise behind her. The alien children screamed a third. Skethri had found a gap in their defense and was racing toward the clustered students, but Professor Kethvoran, despite her terror, threw herself in its path. Her serpentine body was not built for combat, but it was large enough to create an obstacle. The Skethri hesitated, confused by the sudden blockade. That hesitation gave Bomi time to finish driving back his target and wheel around to face the new threat. The cub was magnificent, even at 4 months old. He fought with an efficiency that spoke to millions of years of evolution. His claws raked across the Skethri's scales, finding the vulnerable spots between the plates. His jaws snapped at exposed flesh. His body twisted and dodged with a flexibility that seemed impossible for something made of muscle and bone. The Skethri retreated. Regrouping in the tall grass, Yuna counted 7 of them still moving, including the first one that Bomi had wounded. The creatures were learning. They watched with their 4 gleaming eyes, analyzing the unexpected resistance, searching for weaknesses. "They will try again," Yuna said, breathing hard. "And there are too many for just Bomi and me to stop." "What do we do?" asked Pexalar, the young Moktori, his voice shaking but his eyes showing something other than pure fear. Now Yuna looked at the alien children around her. They were so different from her different shapes, different biologies, different evolutionary histories. But right now, they were all prey together, and that meant they needed to become something else. "Each of you has abilities," Yuna said quickly. "I saw them in the presentations today, and we need to use them." "Our abilities are defensive," protested the young Grothini, his armored form still locked tight. "We cannot fight like your beast can." "You do not need to fight like Bomi," Yuna replied. "You need to fight like yourselves." She pointed at Dexari. "You can create bright light." "Yes." The crystalline student nodded uncertainly. "Skethri come from a world with very dim sunlight." Yuna continued, remembering the database entry. "Your light could blind them, or at least confuse them." She turned to the Moktori students. "Your pheromones affect mood and perception. So can you create something that makes them dizzy or disoriented?" Pexalar's antennae twitched as he considered this. "We have never used our pheromones offensively, but the chemical compounds could theoretically cause sensory disruption in carbon-based neural systems." "Then do it," Yuna said. She looked at the Grothini student. "You cannot fight, but your armor makes you impossible to hurt. So you can be a wall for the smaller students to hide behind." The Grothani's eyes, barely visible through the gaps in his locked plates, widened with understanding. "I can be a fortress." "Yes." Yuna confirmed. She assigned roles. Quickly, the Jexri student could use her water sphere to create a slippery barrier on the ground. A small Velinari student, who could change colors, would provide camouflage for the most vulnerable members of the group. Everyone had something to contribute. "This is insane," Professor Kethvoran whispered, but there was something new in her voice, something that sounded almost like hope. Children defending against predators through coordinated ability use. This has never been documented. "Then you can write a paper about it later," Yuna said with a small smile. "Right now we survive." The Skethri attacked again. This time, they were met with chaos of a different kind. Nexari flared her crystalline body to maximum brightness, creating a burst of light that made the lead Skethri shriek and veer away. Its 4 eyes temporarily blinded Pexalar and the other. Moktori released a coordinated cloud of disorienting pheromones that turned the air thick and strange. The Skethri, who entered the cloud, began to move erratically, their coordination broken. The Jexri students spread water across the rocks, creating a slick surface that sent one Skethry sliding helplessly past its intended target. And through it all, Bomi and Yuna moved like a single creature. The 8-year-old human girl and the 4-month-old lion cub fought side by side with a coordination that transcended words when Yuna swung her branch to the left. Bomi covered her right when Bomi leaped at a threat. Yuna was already turning to protect his flank. They did not speak, did not signal, did not plan. They simply moved together as if they had been born to fight as partners. "How are they doing that?" asked Exari in wonder. Her light still blazing. "How do they know what the other will do?" Professor Kethvorin watched with scientific fascination even as she helped direct the other students. Humans and their companion animals share a bond that has evolved over tens of thousands of years, she said. They can read each other's body language and intentions without conscious thought, and it is one of the most remarkable examples of interspecies cooperation in the galaxy. Another Skethry fell to Bomi's claws. Another retreated from Yuna's swinging branch, but the creatures kept coming. Driven by hunger and the instinct to overwhelm through numbers, Yuna felt her arms growing tired. The branch was heavy, and she was just a child. No matter how brave she tried to be, Bomi was slowing too. His young body not yet built for sustained combat. "We cannot keep this up forever," Yuna admitted, gasping for breath. "Then we adapt," said a voice beside her. It was the young Grothany. His armored form no longer locked in defensive mode. He had unlocked his plates just enough to extend his massive arms. And he stood beside Yuna with determination in his small eyes. "I can be more than a wall," he said. "Teach me what to do." Yuna stared at him for a moment, then nodded. "When they come close, swing your arms like this," she demonstrated. "Use your size to push them back." The Grothany mimicked her motion, his armored arms cutting through the air with surprising speed. "Like that," Yuna confirmed, one by one. The other alien children began to emerge from behind the rocks. They were still afraid, still uncertain, but they had seen something new. They had seen that fighting back was possible, that working together could overcome individual weakness, that prey did not have to simply accept death. The next wave of Skethry hit a defensive line of 8 young beings from 8 different worlds. Exari blinded them with light while Pexolar confused them with pheromones. The Grothany swung his massive arms while the Jexri created obstacles with water. The Velinari student created visual distractions with her color-changing skin, and at the center of it all, Yuna and Bomi fought and bled and refused to give up. One of the Skethry's claws caught Yuna's arm, leaving a burning scratch that made her cry out. Another managed to bite Bomi's shoulder before the cub threw it off with a snarl of pain, but they kept fighting. They had no choice. "Hold the line," Yuna shouted, echoing words she had heard in 100 human war movies. "We hold together or we fall together, and against all probability, against all logic, against everything the Galactic Union had ever documented about predator-prey encounters." They held. The remaining Skethry finally pulled back, their simple predator minds unable to comprehend what was happening. Prey was not supposed to fight back like this. Prey was not supposed to coordinate and adapt and refuse to break. The creatures retreated to the far side of the biodome. Hissing and writhing in confusion, Yuna allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her arm ached where the Skethry had scratched her, and her muscles burned from exertion. But she was alive. They were all alive. "Is it over?" asked the trembling Velinari student. Yuna looked at the cluster of Skethry across the clearing. They were not leaving. They were regrouping. "No," she said quietly. "They are just changing tactics." She looked at the exhausted faces around her and felt a fierce pride burning in her chest. These alien children had never faced a predator before today. They had never fought for their lives, but they had stood with her when it mattered. They had become something new, something that had never existed before in the galaxy. They had become a pack, and a pack protected its own. The Scythery had learned from their failures. Una could see it in the way they moved now. No longer rushing forward in hungry waves, but spreading out in a slow encirclement. Their four eyes gleamed with a cold intelligence that sent shivers down her spine. These creatures were not mindless beasts. They were problem solvers, adapting to the unexpected resistance, just as she had taught her alien classmates to adapt. They are surrounding us, Professor Kethvorin observed, her voice tense but steadier than before. A classic containment strategy designed to prevent escape and wear down defenders through sustained pressure. Una wiped sweat from her forehead and tightened her grip on the branch that had become her weapon. Her arm throbbed where the Scythery had scratched her, but she pushed the pain aside. Pain was just information, her mother always said. A signal to be acknowledged and then managed. How long until station security breaks through the doors? She asked. Unknown, the professor admitted. The lockdown protocols are designed to prevent dangerous organisms from spreading, which means they prioritize containment over rescue. So we could be here for hours or longer. Una looked at her exhausted companions. The brief rest had helped, but they were still children. The Moktori students were trembling from the effort of producing so many pheromones. The XR's crystalline body had dimmed significantly, her light reserves depleted. Even the sturdy Grothany was breathing heavily, his armored plates clicking with each labored breath, and Bomi Una knelt beside her lion cub, examining the bite wound on his shoulder. The bleeding had slowed, but he was clearly in pain, and his usual boundless energy had faded to a watchful stillness. "You were so brave," she whispered to him, scratching behind his ears. "The bravest lion in the whole galaxy," Bomi responded with a soft chuff, pressing his head against her hand, even hurt and tired. He was ready to fight again if she asked him to. That trust, that absolute loyalty, made Una's eyes burn with tears she refused to let fall. "We need a new strategy," she announced, standing up to face the group. "Fighting them one wave at a time will just tire us out until we cannot fight anymore. What choice do we have?" asked the Jexri student, her water sphere rippling with anxiety. "We cannot attack them, and we cannot escape. Maybe we can change the battlefield," Una said thoughtfully. Looking around the biodome, the African savanna simulation was designed to mimic Earth's grasslands, but it was still an artificial environment. There were controls somewhere, systems that managed the temperature, lighting, and atmospheric conditions. "Professor, can you access the biodome's environmental controls from here?" Professor Kethvorin's forearms twitched with sudden interest. "There is an auxiliary panel near the eastern wall, but reaching it would require crossing open ground. What could you do if you reached it?" "Many things," the professor said slowly, her scientific mind beginning to work despite her fear. "The temperature, the humidity, the light levels. The atmospheric composition within safe limits, of course. Scythery come from a cold, dark world," Una remembered. "What if we made it hot and bright in here? Really hot and really bright?" Understanding dawned on the professor's alien face. "They would be severely disadvantaged. Their metabolisms are optimized for cool environments, and their eyes are sensitive to strong light. Then we need to get you to that panel." Una turned to the group and began giving orders. It felt strange. An 8-year-old human directing aliens who were centuries ahead of her species in technology, but no one questioned her in this moment. Experience with survival mattered more than age or species. "Xari, I need you to save your light for one big burst when I give the signal. The brightest you can possibly make." The crystalline student nodded, understanding. "Grothany, what is your name?" "Torvax," the armored student replied. "Torvax, you will escort Professor Kethvorin to the control panel, and nothing gets through your armor." "Nothing," Torvax agreed firmly. Everyone else, we form a distraction. So we keep the Skethri focused on us while the professor reaches the panel. That is incredibly dangerous, Bexolar pointed out, though his voice held admiration rather than objection. Everything about this is dangerous, Una replied. But if we do nothing, they will eventually overwhelm us anyway. So at least this gives us a chance. She looked at each of her alien companions in turn. These beings who had been strangers just hours ago, who came from worlds and cultures utterly unlike her own. They looked back at her with something new in their eyes. Trust. Everyone ready. Nods and affirmative sounds from around the circle. Then let us show these Skethri what happens when they mess with our pack. The plan went into motion. Una led the distraction group toward the center of the clearing. Deliberately making noise and drawing attention, Bomi moved beside her, his injured shoulder slowing him but not stopping him. The Skethri responded immediately, their encirclement shifting to focus on the apparent threat, while the creature's attention was fixed on Una's group. Torvax and Professor Kethvoran began moving along the edge of the biodome. The Grothani's heavy footsteps were masked by the commotion in the center, and the professor's serpentine form slid silently through the grass. "Come on, you ugly snakes," Una shouted, waving her branch. "Are you afraid of a bunch of children?" The taunt worked better than she had expected. 3 Skethri broke from the circle and rushed toward her. Vexari. Light burst now. The crystalline student blazed like a small sun. The attacking Skethri screamed, a horrible high-pitched sound, and veered away with their eyes squeezed shut. The flash also drew the attention of the rest of the pack, giving Torvax and the professor a few more precious seconds to advance. But the light faded quickly, and Vexari slumped with exhaustion. "I cannot do that again," she whispered, her crystalline body now barely glowing. "You do not have to," Una assured her. "Just stay behind me." The Skethri regrouped and came again. This time, there was no flash of light to save them. Una swung her branch with all her remaining strength, feeling the impact shudder up her arms as she connected with the lead creature. Bomi intercepted another, his injured body still moving with deadly grace. The Moktori students released everything they had left, filling the air with disorienting chemicals. It was not enough. One Skethri got through. It lunged toward the exhausted Vexari, jaws wide to clamp onto her crystalline form. Una saw it happening but could not reach her in time. Nitrogen monoxide. She screamed, but someone else was there. The young Velinari student, the one who could change colors, threw herself in front of Vexari. She had no weapons, no claws, no venom. All she had was her body and her courage. The Skethri's jaws closed on her arm. Instead of Vexari's throat, the Velinari screamed in pain, her skin flashing through a dozen colors in rapid succession. And then something unexpected happened. Torvax, halfway to the control panel, heard the scream and turned back. He abandoned the mission, abandoned safety, and charged toward his fallen classmate with a roar that shook the biodome. His armored body slammed into the Skethri with the force of a small vehicle, sending the creature flying. He stood over the wounded Velinari, his armor plates fully extended, his young eyes blazing with protective fury. "You do not touch my packmate," he bellowed. Packmate Una felt her heart swell. At the word, Torvax had never known what a pack was. Until today, none of them had. But they understood now. Professor Kethvoran reached the control panel. Her 4 arms flew across the interface, accessing systems and overriding safeties. The biodome's lights began to brighten. The temperature started to climb. The Skethri felt the change immediately. They writhed and hissed, their cold adapted bodies struggling with the rising heat. Their sensitive eyes blinked against the intensifying light. "More," Una shouted. "Push it higher." The professor pushed it higher. The artificial sun blazed down with the full fury of an African noon. The air grew hot and dry, mimicking the savannah at its most brutal. The Skethri could not take it. First one, Then another, then all of them began retreating toward the only cool shadow left in the biodome. The ventilation shafts from which they had emerged, they slithered back into the darkness, defeated not by claws or weapons, but by the environment itself. When the last Skethri had vanished into the vents, Professor Kethvorin sealed the shafts with emergency barriers. The biodome fell silent, except for the heavy breathing of 8 exhausted children. Una looked at her companions. They were scratched, bruised, and some were bleeding. The Velinari student was cradling her bitten arm, tears streaming down her color-shifting face. But they were alive, all of them. Together, Una sat down heavily on the ground. Suddenly too tired to stand, Bomi curled up beside her. Resting his head on her lap, around her, the alien children gathered close, their different bodies pressing together in a huddle that would have seemed impossible just hours ago. They did not speak. They did not need to. They were Pack, and the Pack had won. The emergency doors finally opened 3 hours after the lockdown began. Station security forces poured into the biodome, expecting to find casualties. Expecting the worst, what they found instead made them stop in their tracks. 8 children sat in a circle at the center of the clearing, their different bodies leaning against each other in a huddle of exhaustion and solidarity. A human girl with scratches on her arms sat at the center, a golden-furred earth predator sleeping peacefully with its head in her lap. Around them, the bodies of wounded Skethri lay scattered across the ground. The security commander, a massive Grothane named Vexthor, approached slowly. His combat experience had taught him to expect many things, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this scene. "Report," he demanded, his voice gruff with confusion. "What happened here?" Professor Kethvorin slithered forward to meet him, her serpentine body still trembling slightly from the ordeal. "These children defended themselves against a Skethri swarm for over 2 hours," she said, and her voice carried a note of wonder that she made no attempt to hide. "They fought, adapted, coordinated, and ultimately drove the creatures back using environmental manipulation." The security commander stared at the huddled children. "Children did this. That child did this," the professor corrected, pointing one of her 4 arms at Una. "She led them, and she taught them how to fight as a unit." Medical teams rushed in to treat the wounded, the Velinari student who had sacrificed herself to protect. Vexthor was carefully lifted onto a floating stretcher, her bitten arm already wrapped in healing gel. Bomi received treatment for his shoulder wound, accepting the attention with the patience of a creature who understood that help was being given. Una refused to let go of his fur the entire time. Dr. Sumin Park arrived 20 minutes later, having fought through security checkpoints and bureaucratic obstacles to reach her daughter. She found Una sitting on a medical bed, Bomi beside her, surrounded by alien children who refused to leave her side. Una, her mother, breathed, rushing forward to embrace her. "I am okay, Mom," Una said into her mother's shoulder. "We are all okay." Dr. Park pulled back, her eyes scanning her daughter for injuries. Then looking at the gathered alien children with growing amazement. "The station is buzzing with what happened," she said. "The Galactic Council has already called an emergency session to review the incident." "Am I in trouble?" "In trouble," Dr. Park laughed, though there were tears in her eyes. "Una, you are a hero." 2 days later, the formal review took place in the Galactic Union's Grand Council chamber. Representatives from over 100 species filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. At the center of the chamber stood Una, Bomi at her side, facing the assembled delegates. The Vethkai High Scholar, a being of pure crystalline beauty named Vexthor, served as the primary examiner. She was Vexthor's grandmother, and her faceted eyes held both gratitude and curiosity. "Young human," Vexthor began, her voice resonating through the chamber, "you were asked to explain what natural weapons your species possesses, and you answered by demonstrating with your companion predator, But the council wishes to understand something deeper. Yuna waited, her hand resting on Bomi's head for comfort. Your species has no venom, no armor, no claws, Dex Voran continued. Your bodies are fragile by galactic standards, and your senses are limited. Yet you not only survived a Skethri swarm, but led 7 children of superior species to victory. The chamber was absolutely silent. How? Dex Voran asked. Simply. Yuna took a deep breath. She thought about everything that had happened in the biodome. The fear, the fighting, the moment when Torvax had called Dexari his packmate on Earth. She began, her young voice somehow filling the vast chamber. Humans learned a long time ago that we could not survive alone. So we made alliances. She scratched behind Bomi's ears. We found wolves and made them into dogs. And they protected our camps while we slept. We found horses and learned to ride them across distances we could never walk. We found hawks and trained them to hunt with us. The delegates leaned forward, captivated. But more than that, Yuna continued. We learned to make alliances with each other. And humans from different tribes and different lands learned to work together, to share knowledge, to protect each other. She gestured at the alien children sitting in a special section of the chamber, all of them watching her with fierce pride. When the Skethri attacked, I did not beat them because I was strong, and I did not beat them because humans are special. But I beat them because I knew how to build a pack. She looked directly at Dex Voran. Every one of those children has abilities I do not have. And Dexari can create light. Torvax has armor I could never pierce. Pexolar can affect minds with his pheromones. I have none of those things. Then what do you have? Dex Voran asked. I have the ability to see what everyone can do and find a way to make it work together, Yuna answered. I have the ability to stay calm when prey species panic. And I have the ability to fight beside a predator as a partner instead of being afraid of it. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Humans are not the strongest or the fastest or the most dangerous. But we might be the best at making friends, and on a death world like Earth. That turned out to be the most important survival trait of all. The chamber erupted in discussion. Hundreds of species debating what they had just heard. Dex Voran raised her crystalline arms for silence. The council has heard the testimony, she announced. And we will now deliberate on the implications for humanity's role in the Galactic Union. The deliberation lasted less than an hour when the delegates returned. Dex Voran's crystalline form blazed with warm light. The Galactic Union formally recognizes humanity's unique contribution to interspecies relations, she declared. Your species will be designated as Category 1 integrators, beings whose natural ability to form cooperative bonds across species barriers makes them invaluable to galactic harmony. The chamber filled with sounds of approval from dozens of species. Dr. Park was openly crying now, her pride in her daughter overwhelming her professional composure. But Yuna was not looking at the delegates or her mother. She was looking at her friends. Dexari, whose crystalline body was glowing brighter than ever. Torvax, who gave her a solemn nod of warriors' respect. Pexolar, whose antennae waved in the Mokturi gesture of deep affection. The Velinari student, her arms still bandaged but her smile radiant. All of them her pack that night. Yuna sat in her quarters with Bomi curled at her feet. The view outside her window showed the endless stars of the galaxy. Worlds beyond counting, waiting to be explored. A soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find all 7 of her alien classmates standing in the corridor. We wanted to thank you, Dexari said, her light gentle and warm, for teaching us what a pack means, and for showing us that we could be brave, added Torvax, and for not giving up on us when we were afraid, finished Pexolar. Yuna smiled, feeling tears prick at her eyes. You taught me something too, she said. What could we possibly teach you? Asked a Velinari student. That pack is not about species, Yuna answered. It is about choosing to protect each other. She stepped back, opening her door wide. Do you want to come in and watch the stars with me? They did. And so, on a station floating between worlds, 8 children from 8 different species sat together watching the galaxy turn. Bomi woke from his nap and looked around at the strange beings surrounding him. Then he yawned, stretched, and settled back down to sleep. He knew Pac when he saw it, and this was Pac outside the window. The stars burned on, indifferent to the small miracle happening in one tiny room. But miracles do not need an audience. They only need a beginning, and this one had just begun.